Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Social Media Manager for HAR. I'm joined this morning by HAR's IT Infrastructure Manager, Edward Moncur. Edward, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here again.
I should say welcome back. This is your second appearance on our program, but all new stuff that we're going to be talking about today. A lot of new things going on, some threat trends, I should say, that you're going to share with us, and a lot of other information. So if you're watching this morning, be sure to like this post and share it with other realtors who'd benefit from hearing from it as well. I do want to mention before we get started that today's Member Focus Monday is sponsored by Harris County Flood Control District. Floods are powerful, but knowledge is too. On mapnext.org, you can get a better understanding of flood risks throughout Harris County. So take a look at it for yourself and for your clients today. So, Edward, again, thank you for joining us this morning. I know this is your second appearance on our program, but if you could just give us a little self-introduction, who you are and what you do.
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me here again. Like I said before, it's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to our members. In my role, unfortunately, I don't interact with members all that much, except for when there's a problem. So, um, my role, I'm the IT Infrastructure Manager. I've been an IT professional for more than 20 years, and in that capacity, I lead a small team with the responsibility of maintaining the vast majority of HAR's technology assets. Whether these exist on premises or in the cloud, we manage virtually all of HAR's technology, whether internal or member facing, with the exception of the HR website and the mobile app, which fall under another staff leader and team. But we cover application support for staff, cybersecurity, business continuity, disaster recovery planning, and more recently to expanding the remote work technologies that we rely on so much today.
Very good. Thank you. And not to make light of COVID, but we were joking a little bit that you were the virus expert, and hopefully you have a vaccine for us this morning.
I'll try my best.
Just not that virus, the other virus, right? So,
Right, right.
yes, and a lot of people on here telling you good morning this morning. They're excited to hear what you have to
Good morning.
say. And Renee Galvan says he just wants your turkey recipe. So, um, we'll be looking for that from you as well.
Beginner's luck.
Very good. So recently we saw an article that I shared with you. Worst passwords of 2020 are here, and they're horrifying. The article made you cringe, I'm sure, but we hear that it's important to have a more complicated password, but can you explain why that's so important? And also, if you have recommendations for password creation or password managers for the people watching today.
Christina, I'm not surprised that people choose bad passwords. What does surprise me is that so many still choose the worst possible passwords that you can think of, like password 123 or QWERTY or 123456, or even the foreign language equivalents of those things, although the numbers wouldn't apply in that case. Poor password selection and reused passwords may subject more user data to unnecessary risk than any other single practice I can think of. If we think about it, your online identity is determined through an account, and that account has an associated username and password. And often, that is all that prevents unauthorized use or an account takeover. Yeah, so choosing a password should be done deliberately and with care. And I've seen over the years through our own staff education initiatives, our staff have become better educated on the importance of good password selection, and that in turn has resulted in fewer security events or potential security incidents attributed to poor passwords. So what that tells me is that in the IT and computer security space, we must do a better job of informing the greater public of the risks they face. So that's from the technical side. But on the human side, I also understand the frustration that the average user may feel with the whole password selection headache. Recently, I read an article that suggested that the average business user has 100 or more passwords to remember. And I don't know about you, but I think we're not wired to choose that many quality passwords. And that's where password management programs absolutely shine. And I personally recommend the password manager called LastPass. There are others out there, but just a couple of the advantages of a password manager is that it run typically on a PC or Mac, Android or iOS devices. It'll synchronize your passwords across those devices, and it also allows you to share access to team members without compromising your password security.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And are those relatively inexpensive? The different password managers out there, like LastPass.
Most password management programs have a free tier and then a paid or premium tier. I think
Mm-hmm.
the paid tier that I subscribe to is negligible. We're talking about less than $30 a month the last time I checked.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a worthwhile investment in securing your online accounts. So, like I said, free tier and then a paid tier. But I would recommend that everyone subscribe to the paid tier because we want these companies to be able to at least break even, but beyond that, to do some research and to improve the products that keep us all safe.
Absolutely, and if they are getting paid, they can do that a little bit easier.
Right.
What about even and this is something that I've wavered on a little bit with iOS devices. You have Face ID. How do you feel about Face ID, or like for instance, my bank app? It has where I can type in my password or I can do Face ID. What do you think about that?
You know, I think iOS, Apple has had some criticism over the years. I think that with the Touch ID first, with your fingerprint
Mm-hmm.
recognition, and now with Face ID, uh, those uh, those concepts and those technologies are quite safe and quite secure because they basically grab certain components of your face and they tokenize it securely on the phone. And what they're passing over to Chase or to Bank of America is just a tokenized version or representation of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the risk there is significantly low. I'm not particularly concerned about it, and I use those features on a regular basis.
Okay, great. That's good to know. That was not the answer I was expecting from you, so that's good to know. So obviously we have a lot of realtors that watch our program, and we're going to get to things they can do to protect their clients in a moment. But let's just start with themselves. What can realtors do to manage and protect their personal data?
So let me answer this in two parts because I don't want anyone today that's watching to feel overwhelmed. I'll give you some basic steps first and then a few advanced steps. So
Okay.
the first thing that we can do, don't overshare on social media, right? Opt out of those quizzes that ask for personal data, such as the street you grew up on, your childhood pet's names, or favorite teacher. These The answers to these questions are coincidentally the same that are used for security validation or online account recovery. So it's just not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I would say in your video conference sessions, ensure that no sensitive data is visible in the background, whether that's on whiteboards like I have behind me here, or sticky notes or anything else that potentially would be embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
Assess your background for anything that may be on the face of it innocuous, but potentially of some value to someone with bad intentions. And then use virtual backgrounds wherever appropriate on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Next, I'd say be wary of email messages, particularly at this time of year. We're all excited about getting gifts, but if you get a random link that says you got a gift card, you should be suspicious. If you're not expecting it, I would say use a critical eye to evaluate it, and don't allow your curiosity to get the best of you. And then the final basic tip is for any of you that are still traveling, whatever that means nowadays, avoid connecting to free and open Wi-Fi. And by
Mm-hmm.
open Wi-Fi, I mean that there's no passphrase or passcode required to connect because your data can be compromised through various types of attacks on such a network. Now, for the advanced folks, I have just two recommendations. If you are traveling and you feel that you absolutely must connect to an open Wi-Fi network, then utilize a VPN service. And a VPN VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It essentially creates a private network over the internet to protect your communications. ProXPN is a good example of a VPN service, and I'll ask one of my team to just put the link somewhere in the comments here,
Mm-hmm.
and you can go ahead and take a look at it. But it is something that I've tried and I trust. And then you can also use multi-factor authentication wherever a website allows it. And multi-factor just means using another enhancement or another method on top of your basic username and password requirements, such as an SMS message sent to your phone with a one-time use numeric code, or an authenticator app, or even a physical token that you have to insert into your computer.
Okay, very good. I do see RAM, and you mentioned emails and suspicious emails, and you have some examples to show us earlier. And RAM is actually asking a question about that as well. So we do have Edward is actually going to show us an example of how to kind of tell if an email is a scam email, if you will. So those are all great tips to protect yourself. But what about client data? Realtors handle so much client data. So, what advice would you give them in regard to protecting that?
Christina, that's a great question, and very important, because attackers aim to publicly expose hacked data to shame organizations and individuals. There are times when I think, we kind of remove ourselves. The personal nature of our own data is very important to us, but when we're dealing with others, maybe not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Data security on your part, with client data, may expose privileged client communications, and in doing so, not only does it harm the client, but it'll do serious brand damage to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say treat your client data with the same respect and concern as you would your own. Additionally, evaluate where that data is being shared and exchanged, including any internal messaging platforms, and assess the risk of any unauthorized or accidental access. Let's look at Dropbox or OneDrive or any other file sharing services. Yes, they're convenient to be able to share files quickly with colleagues or counterparts,
Mm-hmm.
but do we ever do the additional work and go back and withdraw that access, or even determine what we have shared out there?
Mm-hmm.
Online chat platforms such as Microsoft Teams may have client data stored indefinitely in those chat histories. And, we need to just take a much more comprehensive look at where the data exists, act on securing those communications channels once you identify them, and train staff on the best practices on handling data going forward. The next thing I would say is advise your clients on what to expect in a transaction as it relates to electronic communications, and warn them about the risks of real estate wire fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I'd say regularly update your computers with the updates that are provided for Windows and for Mac, because many intrusions are traced back to outdated and unpatched and publicly disclosed vulnerabilities. So the attackers are taking advantage of the lag time between the time when patches are released and then applied.
That's great. Those are all great tips. Thank you so much. Nicholas did share the proxpn.com for everyone in the comments, so thank you for that. And also, Denise did mention that LastPass is currently offering a discount for Cyber Monday that ends today. It's a 40% off sale, so it's $1.80 a month, and they bill it annually. So thank you for that tip, Denise. That's really helpful on Cyber Monday.
Thank you, Denise. We may have to add Denise onto the staff. I'm not sure.
There we go. She's doing her research for us. So you've mentioned some great tips already for realtors, but as you know, so many people are working from home now. Maybe they even have children doing virtual school from home. So what are some recommendations for anybody that's working from home or managing, virtual school from home or anything like that?
You're not talking about wine, right? We're talking about technology. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about technology. Not how to cope, but just how to protect yourself online.
Okay. Thanks for clearing it up.
Yes.
I think, utilize some of the same practices that you would use while you're in the office. I'm still locking my computer while when I walk away, and I limit physical access to it. My kids know not to come into the office unless I'm here and or specifically ask them to get something from here. Also, they're not allowed to come in and insert a USB device into my computer because it's untrusted. I don't know what's on there. Maybe they were looking for Roblox and downloaded the virus onto the USB. I certainly don't want that transferred over to my work computer. I'd also say It's not a security recommendation, but it's certainly a technology recommendation, and that's always wherever you can use Ethernet when you're on your virtual meetings. Plug a cord in over wireless, hands down. It's going to provide a superior experience. It's going to be much more reliable, and you won't be that person that's fading in and out of the meeting and looking all pixelated.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I think that some staff, with working from home, they don't want to be that person that's a nuisance. They don't want to be the squeaky wheel, and so they're less likely to call IT to report unusual activity. And I'd say, I'd advise them to engage IT as much as possible, even if it's not immediately apparent that it's a work-related issue. We'd rather, deal with it and find it to be, a minor or a nuisance than to have something much more significant occur and we find out late in the game.
Okay, very good. So to that point, you were talking about employees. There are a lot of independent brokers that are in charge of office networks, and maybe they do have people coming into the office during this time. So what would you suggest to them?
I think the first thing that we need to establish is that you're a small business, many of you, and you're just as likely to be targeted as much larger ones. So you can't count on obscurity to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, did you take steps to, I think maybe reduce the potential spread of COVID, but now open yourself up to physical security risks, like
Mm-hmm.
are doors that are normally locked now propped open? Is there someone in the building at the initial point of entry that'll challenge someone that's unknown to, determine whether they need to be in the building or not?
Mm-hmm.
I'd also say, continue if you have them in place, but if you don't, implement regular staff cybersecurity awareness training, because the risks are certainly not going away because we all decided that we're going to work in a different style. I
Mm-hmm.
think in many ways the risks have increased, and just like anything else, I think cybersecurity is a perishable skill, if you will, and so we can't let too much time transpire between our training sessions, because educating the user is really where you make the most impact in improving your overall security posture. I'd also say admit that you need help. IT security is not one of the many hats that you can wear, unfortunately. It's not a skill that's easily acquired, and establishing a relationship with a trusted company specializing in IT security in your area is highly recommended.
Mm.
And then finally, what's often overlooked, I think, is the establishment and regular use of an offboarding procedure. And what that'll do, and it can be as simple as a checklist, is to revoke access by former employees and contractors who no longer require it to certain things, such as your Dropbox or your
Mm-hmm.
DocuSign or any of those platform or transaction management services. It's also especially important for any company that has a social media, either a social media specialist or someone that is actually posting to Twitter or Facebook or otherwise on behalf of the company, because that is the company's face. And, a disgruntled former employee can weaponize your social media and post under your name and cause significant backlash. And if you've never seen someone get canceled on Twitter, it's not a pretty thing. So
Right.
many small businesses just will not recover from the PR nightmare caused by such an action.
That's so important, and I'm glad that we brought this up. I've been to different brokerage offices in the past, and I'll walk in, and the right there on a whiteboard we see all the Wi-Fi information, and it's the same for agents, it's the same for guests, it's the same for the brokerage owner. So there's so much information that we put out there that we probably need to protect a little bit more. And like you're saying, that offboarding procedure, I don't know how often that happens, but we know that realtors do change brokerages quite a bit. So
Yep.
you don't want to leave yourself open to exposure. So that's great advice. Thank you. I do see there were a few questions that were coming in, so I want to address those really quick. Jackie had a
Okay.
question about, I guess she got an alert maybe saying that her email address has been compromised on the dark web. She said, "What does that even mean?"
So the dark web is just basically seldom accessed by normal people, corners of the internet, where a lot of times you have, you know, cyber criminals operate in those spaces, and so they may be trading hacked credentials. They may be trading, compromised credit card numbers. They may be trading, all manner of illicit, virtual and physical property. And
Mm-hmm.
so many times it depends on where the notification is coming from. If you have a service, I think there are a couple of companies that actually will scan the quote unquote dark web and look for any of your information, and if it matches, it'll give you an alert. In many instances, I've seen that it's just an email that shows up, which the risk I think is fairly minimal. But I'm going to qualify that by saying if you use a password across multiple virtual properties, for example, you have this wonderful password, you love it so much, you use it on Twitter, you use it on Facebook, you use it on LinkedIn. Then if one of those becomes compromised, then they all have been compromised. Um, Now, back to the dark web, if you're getting a notification from someone that's, some random email talking about the dark web,
Mm-hmm.
in many cases, I would ignore it, but it depends on specifically, are they asking you for something? Is it just a notification? And again, is the communication coming from someone you know versus someone you don't?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Um, so there was another question Veronica asked actually, how to find out what websites are secure and legit. For example, I ordered some items on Facebook and never received the items I paid for.
That is going to be very specific to the website,
Mm-hmm.
and even sometimes the platforms that they're being hosted on. I think that is a much more specific question that I'd be happy to get into after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So, either me or my team will add to the comments here, and
Okay.
I'll also provide my email address at the end. I just think that's a very specific question that
Okay.
you know
I
will be
think,
best answered a little bit
yeah, I
later.
think she was mostly looking for if there's a general way to tell if it's legitimate or not. But I mean, I know just from my past
There,
experience with you, you'd recommend not, putting money on a website that you don't really know,
Yeah,
probably.
I typically look for vendors who either process, PayPal,
Mm-hmm.
or vendors. I'm surprised that a Facebook vendor
Mm-hmm.
wasn't using PayPal or some other type of third party. But if you're looking at a website, your browser typically does a very good job of alerting you as to whether or not the site is secure. Microsoft has some components that they've added that'll let you know if there's a known risk
Mm-hmm.
attributed to a particular domain or website. But again, if you don't have bells and whistles popping up and you're actually communicating through Facebook, then that's that gray area that is hard to determine. So again,
Yeah.
I'd invite her to ask later, and I can give some much more detailed answers if she can tell me about the scenario.
Okay. Sounds great. Zelda had a question about you mentioned companies that can help, like when we were talking about independent brokers. She said, "Do you have any recommendations on companies that we can contract to help with cybersecurity?"
Um, there are some much larger companies, and there are some companies that you can have on retainer.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of smaller companies in the area because they are smaller vendors. I don't quite have permission necessarily to put their names out here, but I'll follow up with an email
Okay.
a little bit later. But if you ask around, I think the word of mouth recommendation is very important. So if you know of a company that appears to be doing it right or appears to be doing it well, or if you yourself have had good experience with a company, um, then be sure to pass that along. I'd also say if you have any type of cyber insurance,
Mm-hmm.
there are some lists that those companies that underwrite cyber insurance will give recommendations in your particular zip code or your particular city as to who they would prefer you deal with on a cyber incident or breach basis.
That makes sense. This might be a lot asking you this offhand, but I know when people have asked me in the past for recommendations for somebody to manage their social media, there's specific things I kind of tell them to look for. Are there any credentials or anything specific that you'd recommend that they look out for if they're trying to choose a company?
Credentials are good. I think the SANS Institute, SANS Institute, has a number of cybersecurity certifications
Mm-hmm.
that you can ask for. But I would certainly I'd ask how long have they been in business? How many people do they have on staff? What's
Mm-hmm.
the average, years of experience? And then also ask for some recommendations from past clients. I think those are all reasonable questions. There's certainly questions that we would ask if we were to engage a company,
Mm-hmm.
and so outside of having a ratings program, uh, and I know ratings is usually a hot topic within the realtor circle. Quite honestly, people want to know, whether it's, you're buying something on Amazon
Mm-hmm.
or you're purchasing a service, what was someone else's experience, and not so much all of the good experiences, the bad experiences as well.
Yeah, very good. I think there we had another question here. Veronica asked, in regards to hackers, is it safer to turn off computers or does it matter? Maybe you're done working for the day. Put it to sleep, turn it off. Does one matter over the other?
No, it really doesn't. I think if you exercise proper security, it really doesn't matter if you turn the computer on or off, because if there's malware or malicious software on your computer, it is set up to only try when it's connected,
Mm-hmm.
and it really doesn't matter if it's midday or midnight. So, proper cybersecurity hygiene, if you will, is the best preventative.
Okay, very good. Another question here. Sherry said, "Is it good to use our home computers to access our bank accounts?" She heard that this should be done through a separate tablet. What is your recommendation there?
No, actually, I think I'd like to qualify that. I have a laptop that I use specifically for all of my critical, online banking or paying, my utilities. Um, I I think that you're not introducing any more risk necessarily, and I
Mm-hmm.
qualify that with what I said earlier. Don't allow the kids to use that computer, right? So maybe get them their own tablet, their own device. Make sure that you're not commingling purposes, if you will. And yeah, I think that the average home computer, on a wired network, the one that you do your taxes on, the one that you do your online banking on, that should be a primary computer, but not to the exclusion of anything else that you're doing.
Okay. And I think I've heard you mention this before. And again, I don't know how much people are traveling right now, but if you're in a public space or using a public device, maybe you're at a hotel that has a little computer lab area, probably not the best place to check that bank account, right?
Yeah, even pre-COVID, it was a bad idea to use
Yeah.
those. Yeah, I think that if you're traveling, you're much better off accessing your online banking from your phone using your data
Mm-hmm.
than anything else, right? So
Yeah.
whenever you're in doubt and you're transiting or you're not necessarily at home, then the fallback would be either to use your phone and use an app, or in some cases, if you're savvy enough, you can tether your laptop to your phone wirelessly or wired, and use that data package that comes through either AT&T or T-Mobile in
Mm-hmm.
order to have secure communication.
Okay, very good. So Demetria has the same question for you that I have, and that is about email scams. How to tell if it's an email scam. And we mentioned this earlier that it's good to alert clients that they might see things like this. But it happens to us as well. And, especially realtors that are dealing with a lot of clients, they might get some of these emails and not pay attention. So I do want to know just if you can share with us how you can tell if an email is a scam or not.
You know, the complexity of those email hacking attempts is so broad, and is very specific. So let's say March, around February, March, we saw a lot of stuff that came out, that was COVID related, right? When the payroll protection programs
Mm-hmm.
and the other business programs were launched. We saw a lot of scam email that was related to that. So the attackers are actually crafting their campaigns, if you will, based on what's trending, what's important. They rely on you to see something that really just piques your interest and you can't resist. And sometimes too, through they're not very moral. So you're like, why would they do this in the middle of a pandemic? Well, because this is their job. They want to
Mm-hmm.
extract some type of financial value out of that interaction. So really, they can be very complex, but I would always take you back to the basics. you know um, is it normal? Is it what you're expecting? Yeah, and when I say normal, is it normal for the type of communication that you receive, either by your job role or by who it's purportedly coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Is it expected? And if the answer to those two things is no, then you need to look a lot more critically. And there are some things that I'll show in a demo shortly
Mm-hmm.
that'll give you an idea. And unfortunately, there's not a way to absolutely tell that it is malicious. What we're trying to help you to do is identify that it's not work related, or it's most likely not legitimate, or it's most likely not coming from who it purports to come from. And once you know what it's not, then you can just dismiss it and hopefully delete it. But there are a couple of things that are, I guess, like the greatest hits of of scams. And so those are like IRS, right? The IRS
Mm-hmm.
never contacts you by email on matters of a personal financial nature. So if you get an email that says it's from the IRS, just dismiss it out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Apple or Microsoft are never going to send you an email asking for you to call them for technical support because something suspicious has been identified on your computer. It just does not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then when in doubt, just contact your IT staff without clicking on it. So if I might, real quick, go ahead
Sure.
and share my screen. Okay, let me pull this up. So this is literally an email that I just got last week, and so I didn't create this myself, and it was just timely. This is an email that's purporting to be a Microsoft Office or Office 365 email, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are a couple of things that stand out to me right away. First of all, if this is coming from Office, if I look at the sender's domain, it's not a Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft Corporate or any other email address that I would expect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. Based on that alone, I'd dismiss it. But just for the purpose of this demonstration, I'd like to say, okay, well, maybe they spoofed or made it look like it's coming from a Microsoft domain. So let's look a little bit closer. This is supposed to be from Microsoft Office, and it says you have a new fax. Well, in my role, I don't deal with faxes all that much. I'm not expecting a fax. I personally would dismiss it. But let's look for other indicators that may give you a sense of whether this is legit or not. I'm going to scroll down, and it says, it's attached in a PDF. Well, attachments typically appear up here. I don't see an attachment, and I don't see the attachment name or a file size, so that's a third thing. And then, if we still needed more convincing, let's go to this link that says view document. And if I hover over it, hover means I just place my mouse over it. I'm not going to click on it, right? Because we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I hover over it. I can see that it's pointing to a website that I'm familiar with. But in this particular context, I don't expect that this website is going to appear in what should be a fax coming from Microsoft, right?
Right.
So, not saying the website is malicious. What
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying is that this makes no sense in this particular context. Then if we need even further convincing, it says eFax. That's another company. And finally, a second link that is pointing us to yet another domain. I'm familiar with this domain, but this for this particular context is out of place. So based on all those things there, my assertion is not going to be that it is malicious. What I know is that it is not productive. So I don't know what it is for sure. I know what it's not. And so I would dismiss it just based on that alone.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So hopefully that helps, because we did see a few questions about that, how to tell if an email's a scam, and it is hard because I know myself, I get a lot of them from title companies, or seemingly from a title company, and I'm not in the middle of a real estate transaction, so it's pretty easy for me to tell. But with realtors that are working with transactions on a daily basis and their clients that could potentially be expecting something, that can be difficult. So thank you for sharing that. So we have a couple more questions for you. One that I think was already answered, but Dorothy was just asking, how do you connect to wired internet at home? Someone did reply, you can connect your laptop or CPU directly to your router. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, I don't I don't have an Ethernet cable that I'm not using nearby. But you know, um, if you many homes don't necessarily have Ethernet wiring throughout. If it's a space that you work from on a regular basis and it's a true home office, then I would advise you to seek out a company. Any company that deals with either alarm installations or low voltage wiring can run an Ethernet connection back to your router for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the one worthwhile investment. I don't I wouldn't even consider operating on my primary computer at home without Ethernet. And the other advantage I see is that most people do not have quality Wi-Fi in their homes. And so, there are going to be dead zones. So, unless you've invested the time in figuring out, for the square footage of my house, I have, an adequate number of Wi-Fi access points, and you accept that there will be some dead zones, then, that area that you're going to be working with most frequently,
Mm-hmm.
especially if that's not where your cable equipment or your telecom equipment, gets installed, then I would think that the worthwhile investment would be just to have that one Ethernet connection run into your primary workspace.
Okay. Sato is asking, is it safe to leave your credit card info on some of the websites that you frequent?
Um, I it depends. It's just like based on reputation or frequency. I'll admit that there are some credit cards that I have stored with trusted providers.
Mm-hmm.
You can LastPass has a feature that'll allow you to enter credit card numbers. So if you trust LastPass to hold your password and you want to, you can actually store the credit card numbers in LastPass as well, and then it can provide it on demand if you're making purchases. And there's a ton of information on LastPass. If you go on YouTube, there's some videos that'll show you exactly how to utilize some of the features. And I mean, there's a litany of features that it has beyond password management.
Great, thank you. So, to that point, when it comes to shopping, as it's, we're in the holiday season, if you will. Tech gifts are always something that are very popular. There's
Yep.
always, the tech gift of the year. We see those lists. What advice would you give to people who plan to gift or even receive tech gifts this holiday season?
So yeah, it's interesting because I just bought a sound bar for my TV, and it had both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity, and I was like, that's neat, and it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
convenient. But it also, the IT security person in me, I started to figure, okay, what implications does that have
Mm-hmm.
as it relates to my overall, technology security? And so many of us, like you said, will receive or give technology enabled gifts over the coming weeks. And increasingly, these devices, which are typically referred to as Internet of Things devices, or IoT devices for short, require Wi-Fi access as part of their initial setup. And we're talking about garage door openers, video doorbell cameras, smart bulbs, internet connected sprinkler systems, and the Amazon smart assistants. I'm not going to say it because she's going to answer in the background, because I have a couple here. Um, but in all cases that you are using these devices, which bring a ton of convenience to our lives, we don't want to open yourselves up to any security risks. And the most basic thing that you can do in all of these cases is to connect these to a guest Wi-Fi network. And that guest Wi-Fi network exists on the same physical hardware, so there's no additional purchase that you need to make. It's virtually separated from your home's main Wi-Fi network. And so again, there's no additional hardware. You configure it on your home router management page.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one of the major brand names, again, a quick YouTube search will give you the information on how to get into it. And so that may bring up a different question. Why do I care? Why a separate network, you may ask? And I would love for it to be a simple answer, but it's a little bit more than a simple answer. And so, as simply as I can put it, IoT devices are still in their relative infancy. They've only been around a few years, and the security, in my experience, that is implemented in them is not always uniformly done across the various vendors. And some vendors, quite honestly, treat these as throwaway devices. So there's not going to be a whole lot of effort on maintaining them going forward, because they're going to come up with the next brand new shiny fanciness that they want you to buy and toss your old one. So each IoT device on your home network broadens the potential attack surface, right? And so let's equate that to the physical security of your home. Each time you add an IoT device, you add that that doorbell camera, you add the garage door opener that you can open with an app. Each one of those is the technology equivalent of adding another window or door to your home. So if we talk about the physical security of your home, now that's another window or door that you have to make sure is being monitored and is not creating a problem for the sake of convenience. So if you reduce the access that each has to your main network, and your main network is where all of your privileged communications happens, and your online banking and so on, reducing that access for those devices onto that main network is always a best practice. So if you gift a piece of tech this year, perhaps add a personal touch and include a handwritten note on why it's a good idea to first connect it to a guest network.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for that advice. And I like the comparison to the physical home safety, because I think that's might be easier for some of us to visualize. So great. A couple more questions while we
Sure.
have you. Roslyn asked, is it safe? Do you recommend buying reconditioned or refurbished devices?
That all depends. I don't see that there's a whole lot of value in reconditioned devices, with some exceptions. If it's reconditioned by let's say Amazon, for example, or reconditioned by Microsoft, then there's a certain trust level that I have with the vendor, and usually there's a significant cost savings. So in those instances, they're treated essentially as new, and the risks there are fairly low. If we're looking at something that claims to be reconditioned, that's on the Facebook Marketplace or somewhere else, or on Nextdoor, or any of those local, then my antenna automatically go up, and I would say no. I mean, I would look at it like I do with most things. What's the problem I'm trying to solve, and is it worth it? And so if you can't trust the source, then I would say no, it's a bad idea.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I know we're over time now, but a lot of questions for you today, which we kind of expected. How safe
Okay.
is the McAfee security scan, the free version, to protect the contents of a computer?
Any of the major vendors, whether it's McAfee or any of the others that have been in the business for quite a long time. Microsoft also has a free version as well. I think they all do an adequate job for the home user, but in any instance, that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to just still use good common sense when you're browsing, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, they're all good, but they're not infallible. And depending on the attack, depending on um, whether it's new, whether it's something they've seen before, obviously no antivirus can protect against something it hasn't seen before, and there's a certain critical mass, if you will, that has to be experienced out in the wild before they're even aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the short answer, which I'm not very good at giving, is that yes, those are good, but I would still encourage everyone listening today, or even in a replay, to
Mm-hmm.
always exercise additional caution in spite of having the software installed.
Very good. Well, Edward, this has been so much good information, and we really appreciate it. I do want to remind everyone really quick that today's Member Focus Monday was sponsored by Harris County Flood Control District. Floods are powerful, but so is knowledge. Mapnext.org will improve the understanding of flood risk in Harris County so that the public, local communities, and emergency managers can make informed decisions to protect lives and property. You can take a look at their website to protect yourself and your clients today. And we're going to show a really quick video from them that they sent over, and we'll be right back to close up today's show. We know how much our clients and customers and us as homeowners care about flood. So be sure to check out mapnext.org for more information there. Edward, any parting comments for our members that are listening and watching you today?
Yes, I just want to leave everyone here with a final thought, and that's, don't feel overwhelmed by the idea of managing your security online or otherwise as it relates to technology. We've covered quite a few things today, and it can seem like a whole bunch coming at you, right? What I'm going to advise you to do is just implement one best practice and then consider that progress, because security is not something you arrive at overnight. It's something that is accomplished through evaluating and incrementally improving your cyber health. And that goes a long way to reducing the risk of your data being compromised. So with that, if you have any questions, please email me at cyber@har.com. And if we didn't get to your question in this broadcast, I'll look through the comments and I'll make the best effort. Either me or my team, one of those guys, will get back to you. And I just appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the great information you shared today, Edward.
Thank you.
So that is it for today's Member Focus Monday. We'll be back next Monday at 9 a.m. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.